The wind still howls in my ears when I close my eyes. The memory never fades, the cliff's edge, the salt on my lips, the quiet before betrayal. I remember their faces above me, my daughter's trembling hands, my son-in-law's shadow tightening behind her. Then the push. The world turned upside down. Rocks, branches, blood, silence. They thought they'd buried me beneath the sound of the ocean. They thought the story ended there. But death didn't want me. It spat me back out, bruised, broken, and burning with something colder than rage. I was not gone. I was reborn. So listen closely. This isn't a story of forgiveness. It's a story of return. Will you walk away? Or stay long enough to see what survival looks like when mercy dies? Mornings in Greyhaven always start the same way: fog, clinging to the windows, the low hum of the sea crawling through the cracks of the old house. The air smells of wet pine and salt, and somewhere beyond the dunes, gulls scream like they're arguing with ghosts. I wake before dawn, because silence is all I own now. Coffee in the same chipped porcelain cup Daniel once used, black as midnight and bitter enough to feel alive. I sit by the window and watch the fog shift, pretending it's the same world he used to see, but it's not. Since Daniel's heart stopped 2 years ago, the house feels less like a home and more like a museum built for someone who never made it back. His tools still hang in the shed. His handwriting still lingers on notes pinned to the fridge grocery lists, half-finished plans for the garden we never finished. Sometimes, I still catch myself answering him out loud. Maybe that's what loneliness does. It turns echoes into conversation. Claire calls sometimes, always in a rush, always between meetings. "Mom, you should sell the house," she says. "It's too big for you." Her tone carries a blend of concern and impatience, like affection trimmed down to efficiency. I can't blame her. She grew up watching me hold everything together while Daniel fought his illness. She thinks independence means letting go. She never understood that for me. It means holding on. Adrian, he's different. Polished. Charming in a way that feels rehearsed. When he first came around, I thought he was good for her steady hands, confident eyes. But there's a thinness to his smile, like someone holding a secret behind perfect teeth. I used to be a nurse. I know the signs of someone hiding rot beneath a clean bandage. Still, I wanted to believe. Claire looked happy, and after Daniel's death, that was enough for me. I wanted peace, to see my daughter safe, loved, anchored. So when they invited me to spend weekends with them, I went. I cooked, laughed, pretended not to notice when their arguments flared behind closed doors. I told myself it was marriage, just pressure. Everyone cracks a little under life's weight. Then came the paperwork. Adrian asked small questions about the house, the insurance, Daniel's savings. Innocent at first, but practiced. Claire brushed it off. "He's just trying to help you organize things," she said. I nodded, though my stomach turned cold. People think betrayal happens suddenly, like lightning. It doesn't. It drips one polite favor at a time, until trust becomes quicksand. Still, I smiled. Because that's what mothers do. We smile through the unease, through the ache, through the suspicion that love might be turning into leverage. I kept Daniel's documents locked away. There were things he left unfinished: insurance clauses, bonds, and one account no one but me knew existed. He always said, "If something happens to me, you'll need this." I never told anyone, not even Claire, especially not Claire. Sometimes, I wonder if she sensed it, the way she'd linger too long near my desk, the way Adrian's eyes would scan the drawers when he thought I wasn't looking. Last autumn, Claire called again. "Let's go hiking, Mom," she said. "You need fresh air." Her voice was soft, but something in me shivered. Still, I agreed, because that's what mothers do. We keep giving chances to the people we raised, even when every instinct whispers not to. That morning, I packed Daniel's compass, an old camera, and a thermos of coffee. I remember thinking maybe this is what healing looks like, walking into open air with the ones you love. I didn't know it was the last morning of my old life. The morning we drove to the cliffs, the sky looked harmless, pale gray, brushed with light, like it couldn't decide whether to rain or forgive. The air was sharp, the kind that bites your lungs and wakes up the bones. Claire sat beside me, humming some old tune she used to love as a child. Her voice sounded thin, careful. Adrian drove, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other scrolling through something on his phone. I watched them through the reflection in the windshield, two people I thought I knew. They looked almost tender. Almost. The road twisted upward into fog. Pines leaned in close, like witnesses, their roots clutching the earth, like they knew what was coming. Adrian said something about the view, about how this trail was one of Oregon's hidden gems. I smiled, because that's what politeness demands when the air around you starts to hum with unspoken things. By the time we reached the overlook, the ocean was nothing but a ghost, silver waves buried beneath a blanket of mist. The sound of the sea rose and fell, like breathing. I remember stepping close to the edge, tasting salt and iron on my tongue. Claire handed me her phone. "Let me take a picture of you, Mom," she said, forcing a smile. "You look peaceful." I turned, the wind lifting my hair, my jacket snapping softly. Somewhere behind me, Adrian whispered something I couldn't hear. The sound that followed wasn't a word. It was motion, a footstep, a push, then silence. The world-inverted sky became ground. Air became stone. My body hit something rock, then branch, then water. Pain came in flashes, shoulder tearing, ribs cracking, the taste of blood. And then, for a moment, nothing. When I woke, I was staring up at the cliff from a ledge far below, half buried in moss and broken pine needles. My body refused to move. My head rang. Above, faint voices cut through the fog. "It's done," Adrian's voice said. Calm. Too calm. "We'll say she slipped. The drop's too steep for anyone to question." "Up?" Claire's voice broke, trembling. She screamed. "She's gone, Claire. Do you hear me? This is the only way. You said you wanted a clean start." "I didn't mean this," Adrian hissed. "It's too late. Pull yourself together. We'll call it in after sunset. It'll look like an accident." Their footsteps faded. My breath hitched. My hand clawed at the earth until my fingers bled. Somewhere deep in me, something shifted. The part that once loved them dissolved, replaced by something quiet and cold. I don't remember how long I lay there before I moved. Maybe an hour, maybe forever. The world blurred in and out, fog, water, stone. My right arm hung useless, shoulder out of socket. I found a root, braced against it, and screamed as I forced it back. The sound echoed off the cliffs, animal, primal, alive. I crawled, inch by inch, through mud and gravel, until I found a narrow gap that led toward the forest below. The sun was already setting, the sky bleeding orange through the mist. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. By nightfall, I reached the tree line. My clothes were torn, my skin shredded, but I was still breathing. I followed the sound of water, a small stream running east. I drank until I choked, then dragged myself along its bank, until I found an old ranger cabin, half collapsed among the trees. Inside, there was dust, a rusted lantern, and a blanket that smelled of mildew. I curled beneath it, shaking. Every blink brought flashes: Daniel's face, Claire's laughter, Adrian's hands. I thought of the insurance papers they'd asked about, the questions that suddenly made sense. $3 million for Daniel's policy, $2 million from the estate, 5 million reasons to make a mother disappear. When morning came, I forced myself to stand. My reflection in the cabin's cracked mirror looked like a ghost blood crusted in my hair, skin gray from shock. But my eyes were still there, still mine. I found a road by mid-afternoon and waved down a truck driver hauling lumber. He looked at me once and didn't ask questions. He drove me to a small clinic, 2 towns over. I gave a false name, Helen Carter, and told them I'd fallen hiking alone. They patched me up, gave me painkillers, and let me rest. That night, I sat in the motel across from the clinic and turned on the TV. The headline crawled across the screen. Local woman missing after cliff fall, family grieves. There she was, Claire on camera, tears glistening perfectly, Adrian's arm around her shoulders, their voices soft, rehearsed. She loved hiking, Claire said. She was adventurous. We think she slipped. The reporter asked about the search. Adrian looked straight into the camera. We just want closure, he said. I felt something inside me crystallize. Closure. That's what they called it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched, memorizing every flicker of guilt that crossed their faces. And then I made a decision. Evelyn Hart would stay dead. Helen Carter would live. Because revenge works best when the world thinks you're buried. For days, I stayed hidden. I moved from motel to motel, paying in cash. I found a woman in the next town who sold me a used laptop for $50 and a prepaid phone for another $20. It wasn't much, but it was enough. When I finally dared to open Daniel's old email, the one tied to his encrypted files, I found something I'd forgotten. Recordings. He'd kept audio logs from the last year of his life, documenting every hospital visit, every insurance meeting, every conversation about our estate. Daniel was always methodical, cautious. He trusted paper more than people. Listening to his voice again nearly broke me, but it also steadied me. He'd left me a map of assets, of passwords, of people we couldn't trust. And so I began to write lists, plans, contingencies. I learned the rhythm of their routines from social media updates, the subtle changes in Claire's voice when she spoke to reporters, the way Adrian's company's financial troubles vanished overnight after my death. They were sloppy. Grief performs well on camera, but real guilt never sleeps. At night, I stared at the motel ceiling and heard Daniel's last message playing on loop. If you ever feel alone, Evie, remember, we built this life together. And no matter who tries to take it, you know how to fight. I closed my eyes, whispering back, I do now. That was the night I stopped being a victim. That was the night the ghost of Evelyn Hart started to build her war. I thought disappearing would feel like freedom. It didn't. It felt like erasure, like the world had drawn a line through my name and moved on. The first weeks after the fall, I lived inside borrowed rooms, shadows stitched to my heels. Cheap motels, bus stations, diners where no one asked for last names. I learned to keep my eyes down and my voice low. The woman I used to be the nurse, the mother, the friend who baked bread for the neighbors, she was gone. All that remained was instinct. Grief has a smell, metal, and salt. But humiliation? That one burns. I watched my own funeral through a cracked motel TV. They found a scarf near the cliff, my blood on it, my hiking boots half buried in mud. The search is ongoing, the reporter said. Family remains hopeful. Hopeful. Claire wore black, hair perfectly pinned, her hands trembling just enough to look human. Adrian stood beside her, holding her hand like a man performing sincerity. When the priest said my name, I almost laughed. Evelyn Hart, beloved wife, devoted mother, gone too soon. Gone. I whispered to the empty room, not yet. That night, I drove back to Greyhaven under cover of fog. I parked 3 blocks from my house, the house that once smelled of cedar and cinnamon, and watched through binoculars. The lights were on. People filled my living room. Laughter, clinking glasses, a memorial gathering. Claire had called it online. I saw Adrian raise a glass. "To Evelyn," he said, smiling that immaculate smile. "May she rest in peace, and may we carry her generosity forward." They all nodded, oblivious. My daughter leaned into him, tears streaking down her cheeks. The same cheeks she pressed against mine when she was small, whispering, "Don't let the monsters get me." The monsters got her. When the last car left and the house went dark, I slipped through the back gate. My spare key still sat under the fake rock by the hydrangeas. The lock turned easily, my own home, opening to a ghost. Inside, it smelled of flowers and deceit. Candles flickered on the mantel beside my photograph, smiling. Alive, framed in polished silver. Claire's handwriting scrawled across a condolence book. She was my best friend. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. Tears are for people who still want to be saved. I went to Daniel's study. Everything was as I'd left it, meticulous, silent. His recorder sat on the desk, a small black device that had survived longer than its owner. I pressed play. His voice filled the room, warm and tired. "Heart account, revision 3. Note for Evelyn, keep backups off-site. Don't trust brokers." I smiled through the ache. Daniel always planned ahead. I found the backups in the safe behind the bookshelf: flash drives, a small hard disk, and something else, a sealed envelope labeled Claire. Inside was a letter Daniel had never sent. It was dated 6 months before his death. His handwriting trembled but stayed clear. "If you're reading this, Claire, it means I'm gone. I hope Adrian is treating you well, but I worry. Be careful with him, charm can be armor. Remember, money makes people forget who they are. Don't let it change you." I folded the letter carefully, slid it into my jacket pocket. She would see it again one day, when the time was right. By morning, I had everything I needed. Daniel's files, the insurance policy numbers, passwords, contacts, and a plan. I left before sunrise, driving north along the coast until I reached a small town called Silver Point. There, I rented a one-room apartment under the name Helen Carter. The walls were thin, the heater clattered, and the ocean was always near enough to hear, but never close enough to touch. I bought a cheap laptop and a set of wireless recorders online. Then, I began to listen. Adrian was careless, a man too confident to cover his tracks. He kept his phone close, but his office had glass walls and a habit of reflection. Every day, I learned something new from emails, financial updates, social posts. He'd already applied for the insurance payout, $5 million. Processing. Claire posted photos of their recovery trip: Paris, Venice, Santorini, smiles, champagne. Hashtags about healing. Every picture was a knife. But vengeance isn't about fury, it's about precision. I began with whispers. I mailed a small envelope to their house, no name, no return address. Inside, a single photo of the cliff, taken the week before the fall. On the back, written in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "The truth always floats." I mailed the same photo to Adrian's office. Then, I waited. Within a week, Claire deleted her social accounts. Adrian filed a police report for harassment. The detective's notes were public record, possible blackmail. I almost laughed. Next, I went after the money. I created an anonymous email and sent a message to the insurance fraud division. Case number 547B. Suspicious beneficiary behavior following insured's disappearance. Evidence attached. I attached Adrian's bank statement, public through corporate filings, showing a sudden $300,000 transfer from a new LLC registered in his name. The kind of thing investigators love. The freeze order came 3 days later. Adrian's payout was halted. Pending verification. I watched the panic ripple. Calls, messages. Claire pacing outside their house, cigarette shaking in her hand. Adrian slamming car doors. the illusion of control cracking at the edges. But it wasn't enough. I needed them to feel what I felt. The humiliation of being helpless, the terror of being seen. So I called. One rainy night. Claire answered. Hello? Static. Then my voice, low, distorted. The cliff remembers, Claire. Silence. Breath hitching. Who is this? Click. I hung up, staring at the phone in my trembling hand. For a moment, I felt sick. Then nothing. Just calm. The next morning, she called the police again. Adrian installed new locks, cameras, alarms. They started sleeping in separate rooms. Fear had moved in with them. Weeks passed. Each time they stepped outside, I was there not physically, but in the rhythm of their paranoia. Anonymous texts, letters, footsteps outside at midnight. The faint sound of a woman's voice humming a lullaby Claire hadn't heard since she was 5. They unraveled. Adrian began drinking heavily. His company's partners withdrew. One night, he called someone a voice I recorded from a cafe across the street. It's her. I swear it's her. Someone's playing games with me, and I can't. He stopped when he saw his own reflection in the glass. The look on his face, that sudden flash of disbelief, was worth every broken bone in my body. But revenge has its own cost. Some nights, I dreamt of the fall again, the wind, the impact, Claire's scream. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart pounding. There were moments I almost pitied her. Almost. Then I'd remember the look in Adrian's eyes when he said, "It's done." No pity after that. One evening, I watched from across the street as Claire sat on the porch, head in her hands. I wanted to walk up, touch her shoulder, ask why. But I knew the answer. Greed, fear, weakness. All the small things that eat at love, until nothing's left. Instead, I whispered to the night, "Not yet." The final act began the day Adrian received the summons. The fraud investigation had escalated. Frozen accounts. Questioning. Subpoenas. He looked pale in the courthouse steps footage, surrounded by reporters. Claire beside him, eyes down. I sent the investigator one last envelope inside, a USB drive containing recordings I'd placed in their home. The drive included a single audio clip. Adrian, it's too late. Pull yourself together. We'll call it in after sunset. Claire, she screamed. Adrian, she's gone. It was enough. The next week, they were arrested for conspiracy and attempted murder. The media devoured it. Grieving couple exposed in insurance plot. Their photos splashed across every screen. I watched from the same motel room where I'd first seen my funeral. This time, the tears came. Not from sadness, from release. When you've been underestimated your whole life, people forget you're dangerous. They shouldn't have. Still, victory never feels clean. There's always blood in the water, even when it's theirs. That night, I sat by the window, the wind howling again, like it had that day on the cliff. I could almost hear Daniel's voice. You did what you had to. But part of me wondered, what if I'd just walked away? What if revenge only built another kind of grave? I didn't have the answer. Not yet. All I knew was this. They wanted my silence. Instead, I gave them my shadow. And my shadow doesn't forgive. There's a strange silence that comes after victory. It's not peace, it's the absence of noise. When the headlines faded, when the arrests were made, I thought I'd feel whole again. I didn't. I felt hollow. For the first time since the cliff, there was no next step, no target, no plan to sharpen me. Only the echo of what I'd done, bouncing off the walls of the small apartment in Silver Point. The air felt heavy, thick with unfinished grief. I watched the ocean through the cracked window. It never stopped moving, endless, indifferent. The same sea that tried to take me had outlasted everything. Love, guilt, revenge. I envied it. Nights were the hardest. I'd hear the rhythm of waves beneath the hum of the heater, and for a moment, I'd forget which sound was real. My reflection looked older, almost translucent. Sometimes I'd reach toward the glass just to see if my hand would pass through. One night, I drove back to Greyhaven. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see if the ghosts had noticed my absence. The rain followed me like it always did, tapping on the windshield in slow, uneven beats. I parked near the overlook, the same cliffs that once tried to bury me. The fog was thick again, swallowing the world whole. I stepped out, my shoes sinking into the wet moss, and walked to the edge. The wind caught my hair like fingers tugging me back toward memory. I could almost hear Claire's voice soft, uncertain the moment before she betrayed me. "Mom, you look peaceful." Peaceful. The word burned now. I stood there for a long time, looking down at the drop. The sea below was black glass, its waves whispering, "Come back." For a moment, I thought about listening. It would be easy one step forward, and the noise would stop. No more memories, no more nightmares, no more shadows. I closed my eyes. The air tasted like rain and salt and finality. Then I heard it a sound from far away, faint but real. A gull crying against the wind. Sharp, defiant, refusing to disappear into the fog. And suddenly, I saw Daniel again, not as he was when he died, but as he lived. His laugh, his hands fixing the garden fence, his voice saying, "You know how to fight." My knees buckled. I sank to the ground, palms against the cold earth. I sobbed not from weakness, but from remembering what it meant to still feel. The ocean didn't want me. Not then, not now. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Daniel's compass, the same one I'd carried the day of the fall. The glass was cracked, but the needle still moved stubborn, pointing north. I pressed it against my chest, feeling its cold metal heartbeat against mine. For the first time in months, I whispered his name. "Daniel, I'm still here." The fog thinned slightly, just enough for me to see the faint glow of the lighthouse in the distance. Its beam swept across the cliffs, steady and patient, a reminder that even lost things can still guide. I stayed there until dawn, knees soaked, hands trembling, watching the sky bleed from black to gray to pale gold. Each minute felt like a small resurrection. When the first light touched the ocean, I made a promise, not to Daniel, not to Claire, to myself. I wouldn't die the way they wanted me to, silent, erased. I would live, loudly and fully, until my existence itself became the proof of their failure. I drove back to Silver Point that morning, with the window cracked open, the sea air washing through the car. My body ached, but my mind felt steady. Revenge had ended. Justice had been served. But something deeper remained, the need to reclaim life. I opened the letter Daniel had written for Claire again. His words no longer hurt. They simply existed. A warning, a wish, a memory. I folded it and placed it in my journal beside one final note I wrote myself. I was pushed. I fell. I rose. The difference between mercy and survival is choice. Then I closed the book. Outside, a storm was forming over the water clouds, rolling in like bruises, wind picking up speed. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Pain had become my compass, and I finally knew where it was pointing. They called it the heart case. It made headlines again. Elder fraud turns murder attempt. The media loved the symmetry. A mother betrayed, a daughter disgraced, a husband exposed. Everyone wanted the ghost's face, the woman who wouldn't die. But no one recognized me when I walked into that courthouse. It had been nearly a year since the fall. My hair was shorter now, silver threads cutting through black. I wore a dark gray coat and gloves that hid the scars. The reporters didn't look twice. They weren't looking for quiet. They were looking for spectacle. Inside, The air was stale, a blend of paper, perfume, and fear. The trial had already begun by the time I took my seat in the back row. Claire sat at the defendant's table, smaller than I remembered. Makeup heavy enough to disguise exhaustion. Her hands were clasped tight, knuckles white. Adrian sat beside her, jaw clenched, his charm cracked. He looked like a man who'd rehearsed confidence, so long he'd forgotten what silence felt like. The prosecutor spoke first, her voice sharp and clean. Evidence indicates premeditation motive, financial gain. The defendant stood to collect $5 million in combined insurance and inheritance. The sound of paper sliding, the click of a projector, the frozen image of a cliff edge filling the screen. My pulse stayed calm. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, sometimes as revenge, sometimes as release. Now it just felt inevitable. Then came the recording, the one I'd sent from Daniel's archive, spliced with my own. Adrian, it's too late. Pull yourself together. We'll call it in after sunset. Claire, she screamed. Adrian, she's gone. The courtroom went still. The sound was faint, grainy, but unmistakable. Claire covered her mouth, eyes wide. Adrian stared straight ahead, face draining of color. I felt a tremor run through my body, but I didn't look away. Every breath I'd fought for, every bruise that had healed wrong, every night of silence, all of it was here, in this one sound. The defense tried to twist it. They called it manipulation. My client was coerced, the lawyer said. She feared her husband. She didn't push anyone, but Claire's silence betrayed her. Fear has a language, and hers spoke guilt. When they recessed for lunch, I stepped into the hallway. The marble floors reflected everything: faces, flashbulbs, ghosts. I walked past the reporters unnoticed, until one woman brushed my arm and froze. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you look familiar." I smiled, the kind of smile that hides knives. "I'm just here to listen." She nodded, uncertain, then turned away. In the restroom mirror, I studied my reflection. My mother's eyes stared back at me, eyes that had seen too much and learned to hold it all quietly. For a moment, I didn't know if I wanted to keep going. Justice had already begun. What difference did my face make now? Then I remembered the letter Daniel had written, "Don't let it change you." It already had. But I could still decide how far. When court resumed, the judge called for additional testimony. The prosecutor rose. "We request permission to play one final recording, Your Honor, provided anonymously but verified as authentic." The file began with the sound of rain, faint and distant. Then a woman's voice, my voice broken but steady. "You thought the fall killed me. It didn't. It changed me. I learned what it means to lose everything and still live. Now you will too." The courtroom turned, searching for the source. Claire gasped. Adrian stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "That's impossible," he shouted. "She's dead." I removed my gloves, stood, and walked down the aisle. Each step felt heavier than the last, but steady. The floorboard seemed to remember the weight of me. When I reached the front, every camera turned. "No," I said, my voice carrying through the silence. "Not dead, just quiet." Gasps rippled through the room. Claire's face crumpled: disbelief, horror, recognition, all tangled in one silent scream. Adrian's mouth opened, but no words came. The judge banged the gavel, shouting for order, but I barely heard it. Time slowed, thick as honey. All I saw was my daughter, the child I'd once carried, now cornered by the truth she'd buried. Claire whispered, "Mom?" It wasn't a plea. It was disbelief made sound. I didn't answer. I simply looked at her, not with rage, but with the kind of sorrow that burns colder than fire. The prosecutor's voice broke the silence. "Your Honor, the witness identifies herself as Evelyn Hart, presumed deceased. Her statement corroborates the evidence. The courtroom erupted again. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed. I didn't flinch. I walked to the stand, took the oath, and spoke. I remember the fall. I remember the sound of his voice. I remember hearing them talk about insurance before the rescue team ever came. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because truth deserves breath. My voice didn't shake. I thought it might. When I finished, the judge ordered a recess to verify my identity. They tested fingerprints, medical records, the scar on my shoulder from the fall. It matched perfectly. By the time the trial resumed, Adrian refused to meet my eyes. Claire, though, she looked at me like a drowning woman, watching a ship sail away. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty. Attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud. The words echoed like a heartbeat. Adrian's mask shattered first. He shouted, denied, begged, until the bailiffs dragged him away. Claire just sat still, tears sliding down a face drained of all color. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to feel the triumph the world expected. But all I felt was something smaller, a quiet, heavy ache that sat behind my ribs. When the courtroom emptied, I stayed behind. The prosecutor thanked me. The judge offered sympathy. The press demanded statements. I gave none. Outside, the world exploded, cameras flashing like lightning, microphones thrust toward me, questions cutting through the cold air. How did you survive? What message do you have for your daughter? Do you forgive them? I stopped on the courthouse steps, the rain starting again, soft at first. My reflection shimmered in the puddles forming at my feet, alive, undeniable. I'm not here for forgiveness, I said. I'm here to prove what strength looks like when love is betrayed. Then I turned, walked away through the chaos, and didn't look back. The following weeks blurred. Articles, interviews, invitations, the miracle mother, the woman who came back. People wanted my story, the revenge, the survival, the drama. They didn't want the silence between the words, the nights spent stitching myself back together. I gave them what they wanted, a smile, a few lines about resilience, a nod to justice. But the real story lived elsewhere, in quiet places they would never see. One morning, I returned to the cliff. Alone. The fog rolled in again, soft as breath. I stood at the same edge where my life had broken open, the ocean below still churning like it remembered me. I dropped Daniel's compass into the sea, watched it fall, a small glint swallowed by endless gray. Thank you, I whispered, for showing me north. Then I turned and walked away. By evening, I filed the paperwork to reclaim my identity. Evelyn Hart no longer a ghost. The government moved slowly, but each signature felt like stitching a soul back together. I donated the insurance payout to a legal fund for victims of elder exploitation, Daniel's money, repurposed for the living. The rest I gave to a shelter for women starting over. Claire tried to reach out once, a letter from the county jail. I never opened it. Some doors, once closed, are better left locked. Still, some nights, I wonder what she wrote. Apology? Explanation? Maybe just the word, why? But the truth is simple. Greed is never about money. It's about power, about who gets to stand and who gets pushed. They pushed. I stood. That's the story. When the sun set over the cliffs that night, I watched its reflection ripple across the water. The light bent and broke, and came back together again. A reminder that even shattered things can still shine. A single tear slipped down my cheek, not for them, not even for Daniel, for the woman I used to be, before the fall. She deserved better. And now, finally, she had it. A year later, the headlines had vanished. The world had moved on, as it always does. Scandals fade faster than scars. The ocean no longer frightened me. I moved to a small house on a hill overlooking the harbor in Astoria, quiet, sun-bleached, smelling of salt and wind. The walls were painted pale cream, the windows wide open. I filled the rooms with music again, old jazz records, Daniel's favorite. Every morning, I walked to the cliffs. Not those cliffs, different ones, gentler. The kind that rise slowly from the sea instead of cutting through it. I'd sit with a thermos of coffee and listen to the gulls cry over the water. Sometimes, I could almost hear his voice between the waves. People in town knew me as Evelyn, the widow who kept to herself but always left fresh flowers at the pier. They didn't know the rest. They didn't need to. For the first time in years, my hands didn't shake when I touched the soil. I planted white lilies and rosemary flowers for memory and protection. Their scent followed me through the day, soft and constant. At night, I wrote. Not about revenge, not about pain, but about truth. How it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, waiting patiently until someone listens. I wrote letters to Daniel, pages I never sent, folded neatly into a box by the window. I wrote notes for women I would never meet, those who'd been silenced, forgotten, underestimated. I wanted them to know that survival wasn't about strength, it was about choice. Every letter began the same way. You are not finished. One afternoon, I received a visit. A young woman, 19, maybe 20, standing at my gate, her hair tied back, a book clutched in her hands. She introduced herself as Lily, a law student from Portland. "Mrs. Hart," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I read about your case in a seminar. The professor said you turned your trauma into advocacy. I wanted to thank you." I smiled, unsure how to respond. Gratitude felt strange when everything I'd done had been born from fury. She hesitated, then asked, "Is it true you forgave them?" The question hung in the air like mist. I looked past her toward the horizon, where the water met the sky, that fragile line where endings blur into beginnings. "I don't think forgiveness is something you give," I said. "It's something that grows when you stop feeding the wound." She nodded, eyes wet. "That's beautiful." "Not beautiful," I corrected softly. "Necessary." Before she left, she handed me the book, a collection of survivor stories she'd compiled for her thesis. Inside the front cover, she'd written, "You showed them what grace looks like." When she was gone, I sat on the porch for a long time, the book resting in my lap. The evening light stretched across the yard, golden and quiet. Somewhere down the road, children were laughing, a sound so alive it almost startled me. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined Claire at that age, hair tangled, knees scraped, running through the garden, shouting for me to look at her drawings. Time folds strangely when memory decides to be kind. I don't know if she ever found peace. Last I heard, she was still in prison, taking art classes, a small mercy. Maybe, in another life, that would have been enough. One night, I dreamed of the cliff again. But this time, when I fell, there was no fear. The air felt warm, and Daniel was waiting at the bottom, his hand outstretched. "You did it," he said. I woke with tears on my face, and the sound of the sea whispering through the open window. I made tea, wrapped myself in Daniel's old cardigan, and stepped outside. The moonlight turned everything silver, the path, the flowers, even my scars. The fog rolled low across the water, glowing faintly like breath. I walked down to the pier, where the tide lapped at the wood, steady and slow. The night smelled of rain and salt and forgiveness, not the kind you give away, but the kind you build inside yourself. I spoke quietly, not to anyone, but to the wind. Kindness is not weakness. There are battles won not by strength, but by dignity. The words felt final, but not heavy. As I turned to leave, I saw someone standing at the top of the hill. Lily again, or maybe just a shadow. The fog swallowed her outline until only her voice remained, carried by the wind. She showed them what grace looks like. I smiled, a small, private thing. By the time the first light touched the horizon, I was already walking home. The world was waking, gulls circling, fishermen shouting to one another, the city humming softly back to life. I unlocked the door, made coffee, and watched the steam rise in slow, silver ribbons. The clock ticked, steady as a heartbeat. For the first time, I didn't dread its sound. Outside, the sea shimmered calm, endless, forgiving. And as I stood there, breathing in the morning air, I realized something simple. Survival wasn't the ending. It was the beginning I'd been too afraid to write. I picked up my pen and started again.